Hey, my handsome ladies and gentlemen, this is Shmeaty. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new. We're going to be taking a look today at a team that I used to climb out of the very low pits to slightly less pits elo. I went from about 2300 to 2550 elo running this team. There is a bit of a glaring weakness, and that is that you are ABA to Fairy, and that's why in the first few battles you may see that I did try this team with a different iteration. It was with a Steelix lead or a Steelix closer as opposed to a Virizion closer, but I found Virizion's core breaking capability, even though it's a well-known meta threat, to be very potent. So we're going to be taking a look at this team today. Let's just get into game number one, and in game number one it's going to be Dragonite leading into Galvantula. Galvantula, a little bit of an awkward lead here. Galvantula will just throw immediately on 3 because Galvantula players, let's just say they have a tendency to throw their moves as soon as they get them. We're going to switch and catch onto our Steelix. That lunge does next to no damage. They're going to rebank and then switch out into a Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz, interesting counter switch to a Thunderfang Steelix. We're going to fire off a Psychic Fangs here, and although Psychic Fangs isn't going to do very much damage, thanks to the fact that we're on Thunderfang, we are in a pretty interesting spot here. We can eat this Dark Pulse no problem, as our defense wasn't debuffed, it was just our attack. But now, we're going to be able to fire off a Breaking Swipe. I'm doing this because Breaking Swipe not only does more damage, but also has that debuff potential, and we debuff the Mandibuzz's attack. Not only that, we throw one Thunderfang switch into the Drapion. Drapion gets the catch of the Dark Pulse, and now we've got our opponent on the back foot. They are going to bring back in the Galvantula. This is a move we can consider shielding, but for right now, we are not going to do so. We can fire off a Crunch here. Unfortunately, I believe since our attack was dropped there, the Galvantula, I should say, may have just been outside of Aqua Tail range, so we're going to go for the Crunch to get the debuff, and now they are definitely well within Aqua Tail range, but we are not going to shield the Drapion here. We're in fact just going to let it go. And now I think we just bring in the Dragonite, look for the farm down. We fortunately are able to get it. And now what does this opponent want to do? Dragonite has a lot of energy stored here. If they bring in the Mandibuzz, it's going to be forced to take a superpower instead. They bring in an absolute relic of the past in a Jellicent. Jellicent, not very comfortable versus Dragonite in this particular scenario. And that was only 3 hexes. That cannot be any more than a Bubble Beam. We are going to let this move through. 40 energy Bubble Beam is not going to cut it there. They're going to switch out from their Jellicent into their Mandibuzz, but we have a Breaking Swipe once again. And if we get this debuff, a Dark Pulse will not KO. We get another debuff, and now I'm very comfortable with no shielding this energy and just committing to a 2-shield Dragonite. But I am going to shield. It's an Aerial Ace. I realistically would decide against that decision if I played this game over. But this Dark Pulse may very well KO now with the tiny bit of Snarl Chip that they got. In comes the Jellicent. Jellicent is going to be tasked with taking a Psychic Fangs and a bunch of Thunder Fangs here. And realistically, this game is just over because we get the second Psychic Fangs debuff. This is absolute peak degeneracy, as we're going to be able to bring in the Dragonite here with the Dragon Claw loaded. And unfortunately for this Jellicent, at -2, they are not going to survive. GG's to this trainer. Getting into game number 2, Shadow Dragonite leading into an Annihilate. We're pretty comfortable here, and we have immediately switched over to the Virizion edition of this team. And Virizion I found to be very, very strong. It's always been this like top meta threat in Ultra League, but just so many teams are unprepared for it specifically season after season that I just needed to give it a try. And fortunately it is coming back to raids relatively soon, as we do have the Univitor coming back. Anyway, I'm yapping. We're going to fire off a Dragon Claw onto the Annihilate just before they're able to make another Rage Fist. And now what do they want to do? They are going to let it go. Unfortunately, they live on 1 HP, or a little bit more than 1 HP, as this Pokemon has a massive HP stat, but we're going to switch into the Virizion. Generally, it's ill-advised to aggressively pivot into Virizion there, as it is, although a very good core breaker, a little bit of a polarizing Pokemon in the sense that it loses very hard where it loses, and it wins very hard where it wins. That being said, they are going to fire off a move here, but an Ice Beam wouldn't even KO because they are not Shadow, so we're not going to respect the Ice Beam. This is probably going to be another Hydro Cannon. I'm going to let this one through as well. Hydro Cannon spam, not going to allow them to overcome this matchup, and they are going to get fully farmed down. Unfortunately, we have 100 energy, but we are going to get KO'd by any one move here. We're going to fire off the Leaf Blade. For those that are interested in knowing, Leaf Blade is the better move to go for neutrally as opposed to Sacred Sword, even though Sacred Sword is Legacy. that information isn't always very readily available, so I thought I'd throw that in here. Nevertheless, we're going to bring in the Drapion, and this Ampharos is just completely cooked, especially with the completely 100% unnecessary catch. Thunder Punch onto the Dragonite is going to KO the Dragonite, but leaves little of this game's hopes remaining for that trainer. GG's. In the next game, it's going to be Shadow Dragonite leading into a non-Shadow Feraligatr. And I found that you can pretty comfortably no-shield a Hydro Cannon from a non-Shadow Feraligatr. From the Shadow Feraligatr, however, and I have the rank 1 Shadow Dragonite here, so this is probably going to be the case for any Dragonite. You will get farmed down before you reach your second move if you let that Hydro Cannon through, but this one, as you can see, not going to be nearly as impactful. We're going to switch out into the Virizion, and Virizion is going to be met with a Zygarde. Zygarde is definitely an interesting Pokemon to see all the way down in my ELO range. Jeez, I thought I was safe from this thing. Nevertheless, I'm going to fire off a Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade onto the Zygarde is going to do considerable damage. Zygarde is going to no-shield, and realistically, all the energy they have here, if they're on the standard moveset of Bulldoze and Crunch, is going to be resisted, so we're going to let that move through. And now, just look to overfarm a lot and just spam Leaf Blades out. That's basically all you have to do as the Virizion in this matchup. They're going to fire off another Crunch, maybe hoping for a debuff, but a no debuff is to be. We're at 100 energy, going to fire off the back-to-back Leaf Blades here, as they are approaching another Crunch, which would actually KO me. They are going to fall to that Leaf Blade, and now, what do they decide to bring in? It's going to be the Feraligatr, so once again, Virizion very strong. It's so strong, in fact, that this trainer is opting to bring in a Feraligatr, which is weak, once again to Virizion, and in the back they show that they have a Golurk, maybe looking to snipe, but a Leaf Blade does like 75% to the Golurk. Down goes the Golurk. They're going to bring back in the Feraligatr, but we've got the superpower loaded on our Dragonite, so this is going to be a GGWP. What we got next is going to be Shadow Dragonite, of course, leading into a Drifblim. We would much more ideally see this Pokemon on our Drapion here, but since it's not a Shadow Drifblim, the Astonished Fast Move Pressure isn't necessarily as potent as it would be otherwise. I think I would get farmed down in the one-shield scenario if it were a Shadow Drifblim. At least that's my recollection. I'm going to shield up this Icy Window because I know I could reach another Dragon Claw. We've already gotten one shield. They're going to switch out into a Primeape, and I'm sending it. The Superpower does more raw damage here, so we're going to fire off the Superpower and then just look to pivot out into Virizion. Virizion will easily be able to take a Rage Fist, a Close Combat, even an Ice Punch if they did have it. So we're going to no-shield the first. It's a Rage Fist, and now that they've sent the first Rage Fist, I'm thinking this is a pretty prime opportunity, maybe to commit the shield. Actually, we're going to let that go. It's a Close Combat, completely deleting our poor little deer thing. I don't really know what Virizion's supposed to be. Kind of looks like an airplane from the top. Nevertheless, we're going to bring in the Drapion for the Poison Sting farm down. Very nice farm down there. They're going to bring in their own Virizion, and we're going to fire off a Crunch. This is going to do some meaningful chip damage, but unfortunately, since all of our moveset is resisted, we're going to get the debuff, switch out, and they're going to bank a bunch of energy, bring back in the Drifblim, and this is problematic, because this just means that if they commit their shield here, which for some reason they don't, they could have perma-debuffed my Drapion, but they opt to not go for that play, and instead go for an overwhelming amount of energy with the Virizion. I believe we may be able to get out of this game somehow. It's a Stone Edge that is not very good for us. I'm going to shield up the next move and just look to get the double up on the Crunch, or maybe a Crunch plus an Aqua Tail. I'm going to fire off the Aqua Tail first. This is not going to be enough to KO from this range, but now with that extra Poison Sting, this Aqua Tail will actually be enough to KO the Virizion. Oh my goodness, what a close game. Getting into the next game, it's going to be a Shadow Dragonite Mirror. This one usually plays out pretty interestingly. You can dictate switch advantage with however you decide to play this. You can either decide to throw the move, or you can commit to the full farm down. In my circumstances, I usually just shield here and dictate switch, but unfortunately, for some reason I wanted to play to an energy on Virizion Con, because a very formerly good team in the Ultra League when I last really hard played Ultra League was Dragonite Double Water, and this may very well be Dragonite Double Water. No, it's going to be Dragonite Double Poison, but it is a water that our Virizion's Leaf Blades are not going to be as impactful against, as it's going to be the Tentacruel, who only takes neutral from grass type damage as opposed to super effective. They're going to fire off a Crunch onto our Drapion, not getting a debuff, so that's just a waste of energy there. They just wasted 10 energy for basically no reason. We are going to be ahead of them in terms of energy here, and now we're going to probably let this move through as well. Unfortunately, we do need our Drapion to combat the Tentacruel here, and even more unfortunately, I played to CMP because I built the Scuffed Drapion. I'm thinking nobody's going to win CMP against me, but I guess everybody else in the Observable universe just has a slightly more Scuffed Drapion than me because I never win CMP. Nevertheless, we're going to fire off a Crunch and just hope that this will somehow get a debuff and like only 2 Leaf Blades KO, but it's realistically just not going to happen here. This Tentacruel has a very, very substantial lead up against us. They're going to fire off a Scold onto our Virizion. Virizion is going to now go for the Leaf Blade. We're going to try to play it out, but realistically, there's just no win con here. We're getting Poison Jab down. We're looking to make the back-to-back Leaf Blades here, but I think even with the damage registration error, we're in 1 Poison Jab range, and that's going to be a GG. No rest for the weary as Shadow Dragonite's going to lead into a Primarina, and I found that Primarinas in the Ultra League, at least at the ranges that I was playing at, nevertheless, they were always on Charm, so I threw 1 Dragon Breath and switched into the Drapion. They're going to switch out into their Hippowdon here, and we are in a spot. We are absolutely in one of the spots we could be in. They're going to fire off a Scorching Sands here. I'm going to actually shield this up because I think I need to preserve this Drapion in order to get rid of the Primarina. And now we can either force a shield or Switch Advantage, which realistically, what is Switch Advantage doing for us? But I'm going to catch a Scorching Sands onto the Dragonite, and this is actually probably the best play that we can make to try to keep ourselves alive in this game. Dragonite's just going to look to make a Superpower here. We're able to make the Superpower, and Superpower is not any damage to scoff at. Primarina, not really the bulkiest in the Ultra League, so you're going to see that Superpower does a lot of damage, and now we are going to commit maybe to a Crunch, maybe to double Aqua Tail. Let's see what we can do here. Hydro Cannon is going to get a shield, my final shield from my Drapion, but I'm going to fire off this Aqua Tail because this Primarina is approaching Aqua Tail range, and now we're just going to bring in the Virizion. Reason for the aggressive Virizion switch is because we're kind of needing Virizion to be very good into their backline. They have a type disadvantage matchup with all 3 of their Pokemon versus Virizion, so this is another trainer that just did not factor in Virizion into their team building. Down goes the Hippowdon, attempting to catch. GG's. So this is going to be an interesting one. Dragonite leading into Virizion. Virizion is going to save switch into a Greninja. Greninja gets the Hydro Cannon caught onto our own Virizion, and honestly, I wouldn't want to play this game anymore. Our opponent agrees with us. GG's. The last game and this one were sped down from 1.5 times speed to 1.25 times speed. That's a whole bunch of nerd talk, but basically, I just wanted to show these last 2 games off for content purposes. This one in particular is to show you guys that you are not alone if you are struggling in the Go Battle League due to game inconsistencies, lag, and the game just being bad and ran by a hamster running on a wheel that is morbidly obese. Nevertheless, we are going to throw 3 double kicks attempt. Perfect fast move timing. We get a frame drop, so the Typhlosion gets a full sneak on our Virizion, and that Incinerate KOs. Incinerate will KO our Virizion here, so we are going to now bring in our Drapion, hoping to get a Poison Sting through, but that's not going to happen either. That's great. So now we're just going to have to be tasked with calling a bait. Hopefully it's a Thunder Punch. It's a Blast Burn. Blast Burn does all of our health. I'm tapping the game to see if the game will update and visually show that the Typhlosion is still throwing fast moves. It's not doing that either. GG's. Getting into the next game, it's going to be Dragonite leading into a non-Shadow Typhlosion, but the way this matchup plays out is a little differently than you would expect. Typhlosion is going to be able to fire off the Thunder Punch here, but this is a non-Shadow Typhlosion, so I'm confident that my Dragonite is going to be able to live this and be outside of Incinerate downrange, so they're going to be forced to throw another move here, but before they do that, I'm going to be able to retaliate with a Dragon Claw of my own and either force a shield or take out the Typhlosion. Typhlosion is not going to let that happen. They are going to shield up and fire off a Thunder Punch, and now because they know how that would definitely play out in the one shield scenario, they get farmed down before they can incinerate us down or make another Thunder Punch to grab our shield. They're going to switch out into their Annihilate, and now that we've chipped with the Dragon Claw, we're in a pretty good spot. We're going to bring in our Drapion. Annihilate is going to fire off a close combat at our Drapion. Drapion nearly getting one shot by the close combat, but a non-shadow Annihilate just does not hit as hard as it needs to. So we are going to eat that close combat, no problem. In comes a Venusaur, and Venusaur is going to be able to get a massive farm down if they decide to. We're going to fire off a Crunch here. Crunch, realistically, I'm fishing for a debuff here, and we do get the debuff. That is absolutely massive. We're also able to make an Aqua Tail, and now an Aqua Tail that, now that it's debuffed, is going to do a solid chunk onto the Venusaur. We now are tasked with bringing in the Virizion to a Venusaur with 100 energy. We attempt a 1 double kick and a catch onto our Dragonite. Although we don't get the catch, the Dragon Breath chip with the debuff has added up quite a bit. Of Sludge Bomb is going to do quite a bit of damage onto our Virizion, but we know that the Typhlosion does not have a Thunder Punch loaded. So what we do, they are energy dry. We're going to throw 3 double kicks, and we are going to unfortunately take an extra Incinerate because we throw 3 double kicks there. We are going to take the Incinerate, and now we're going to fire off the Sacred Sword. We could have played this game a lot cleaner, but this Venusaur is in Sacred Sword range, so keep fighting back even against that undesirable alignment. GG's. We're going to be getting into the next game. It's going to be Dragonite leading into a Shadow Typhlosion. This is going to play out a lot differently. They're going to switch out, though, and bring in a Drapion. Drapion, a little bit interesting here. They're going to fire off a Crunch. A Crunch would do a massive amount of damage. I was calling it because oftentimes as the Drapion in this situation, I'll just fire off the Aqua Tail because you're almost guaranteed to get a shield, because look at how much damage that does to a Dragonite. We're going to switch out into our Virizion, confident that this Drapion does not have Sludge Bomb, and now if they do have Sludge Bomb, we're in trouble, but they fortunately do not. They also do not get the debuff, and we're just going to keep over farming here. Another Crunch is not going to put us in Poison Sting downrange, so we are going to be able to maximize our farm here, fire off 1 more double kick and a Sacred Sword. This Sacred Sword, I believe, would KO the Drapion. Unfortunately, I'm commentating on these videos, not looking at the health ranges there, and now we're going to see the Typhlosion coming back in. And if we're able to live this Incinerate, we will land a Sacred Sword on this Typhlosion. Unfortunately, we are just outside of range of living an Incinerate here. But now Typhlosion is in a spot. We're going to bring in the Drapion, and they are going to be forced to try to make a catch onto their third Pokemon, but they just keep incinerating an Aqua Tail. It's nearly going to KO. I'm going to go for a catch onto our Dragonite, and oh my goodness, this Typhlosion is 100% buried here. Thunder Punch KOs my Dragonite, but now we can just shield up whatever move this is, because Typhlosion hits very hard, and we've got a 2 0 shield advantage, so we're just going to Poison Sting down. In comes a Virizion, and Virizion is bad news for us. We're going to fire off a Crunch. Unfortunately, our entire moveset is walled by the Virizion. We get the debuff on the first Crunch, and that's exactly what we needed to get back into this game, as Virizion would have been able to grab a shield and maybe even get close to KOing us with the double kick and a Sacred Sword here. They're going to fire off a move here. We can, fortunately, I believe, shield this up. 1 Poison Sting and a move here. They're at the back-to-back moves, though. This is going to get a little bit tricky. Do we have to commit to a farm down? They Leaf Blade for some reason, so they try to catch on to the Typhlosion. The game is over. GG's to this trainer. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching, and Yap session incoming, so if you don't want to listen to it, I completely understand, but we're going to go over a different type of outro today, and that is the Go Battle League ideology that allows me to push forward and stay positive during some pretty rough situations. As we've seen in today's video, it's no secret, it happens to the best of us. Sometimes the game doesn't work as intended, there are many inconsistencies with the intended mechanics of the game not working as intended. There are, you getting RPS, very unfortunate alignment, and even the cups that we're playing in. I'm not a big fan of the Ultra League or the Love Cup at all, to be completely honest with you. But what realistically matters is that you just keep pushing forward. Just continue to grind it out. Make sure that you are trying your best in every single one of the games that you play. And you can overcome unfortunate circumstance, even if it doesn't look the most likely. With all that being said, thanks once again so much for watching. I've been Shmeaty. I hope to see you guys again next time, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.